What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're continuing on with my review Roundup series. And one thing that I want to do with this series, which I've said before, is similar to just doing like a double feature or triple feature. I'm just going to call them review roundups now moving forward. One thing I definitely want to do, like I'm going to do with this video, is cover films in a smaller capacity that I covered on other people's channels. And in case those of you who haven't seen my collab that I did on that other channel for said movie and you're still interested in my thoughts, I'm kind of just going to do a bit of a shorter, more bite-sized review here in this video. So that's kind of my idea with some of these review roundups, is to kind of cover multiple films in one video that I covered on other people's channels, and maybe not necessarily have to dedicate a full possibly 10-minute long video to said movie. If there are movies that you guys would like to see me cover in a longer capacity that I do cover in a shorter capacity, please do let me know, and I'll make that a thing. But let's go ahead and move into my first review for this video, and that is for Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon, one of the most iconic martial arts films of all time. Even if you've never seen it, you know who Bruce Lee is, you know some of the imagery from this film, you know the name, and yeah, I was definitely excited to revisit this film. It's a film I did for my buddy Rashadji Reviews channel, and I gotta say, watching it for the first time since I was maybe 11, it's not a phenomenal watch. You have Bruce Lee in this film doing his Bruce Lee thing, and without a doubt he is the best part of the movie, and the martial arts elements of this film are top notch and exactly what you come to this film for. However, this is an American made production, and so what I think is kind of funny about this film is that you have a lot of actors in this film who are speaking English, like Bruce Lee, like Jim Kelly, like a lot of the different actors who are in this film, but you also have some actors who are speaking in Cantonese, and you can tell that they're speaking in Cantonese, but they're ADR'd, or they're voiced over by somebody speaking in English. And so sometimes that just creates inconsistencies, right? But of course, this is an older film. It knows what it's trying to be. It's not trying to be anything bigger or better than it is. It's trying to be an over-the-top, fun martial arts film, and I think in a lot of ways it does succeed. However, going back and revisiting this film again for the first time in many years since I was 11, I think at this point, if somebody's going back and rewatching this movie for the very first time in their life, I think there's going to be an element of kind of seeing this movie as almost a parody of itself. You have the really cheesy over-the-top ADR in the film that, at times the voices and the bodies and the body language just does not match up in any way, shape, or form. And on top of that, you have Bruce Lee doing, his classic, "Wata, watu, wata, watu, wah." And as much as he's great at that, as much as that's an iconic thing, I think watching it today, I was laughing more than I actually was enjoying it for what it is. Like, there wasn't really a moment when I was watching this where I'm like, this is cool. Like, this is one of those old movies that you're watching where like, oh my God, this is awesome. It holds up. And mind you, I'm saying this as somebody who has like a mother who absolutely loves Bruce Lee. Like, my mom, raised me, showing me different Bruce Lee films. And, some of them I saw when I was a little bit older. Some of them I saw when I was much younger, like this one that I saw when I was 11. And yeah, ultimately, I just think going back and revisiting it, it's not a phenomenal film. I think Bruce Lee is great in the film, and those things that make Bruce Lee who Bruce Lee was are definitely on display here. And I think if you enjoy that, the charm of the time and him just kind of being this badass legend of the time, I can totally respect that. As a movie, the story is all over the place, and it's essentially just a various set of characters that are kind of set to be spies for this tournament that's happening. It's kind of like a Mortal Kombat kind of thing in a lot of ways, Hans Island. And yeah, they pretty much, get in there, they find out who the bad guy is, and at the end, Bruce Lee fights him. Jim Kelly is terrible in this film. He's one of the main characters in this film, and yeah, he is pretty bad. And probably the only other real notable actor that's in this film that actually I would say is the best performance in the film is John Saxon, who has recently passed away in the last few years, but is probably best known for his work in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but has done plenty of things. And yeah, he's in the movie. I think he's a great actor for the movie. I don't think he's necessarily phenomenal, but I don't really think the script and the movie itself, the direction, none of that is really phenomenal in this film. I think this is just one of those classic films that holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts. I totally understand why. It's a Bruce Lee classic, but revisiting it today as a modern cinema goer, and even somebody who loves a lot of classic black and white cinema or films of this time frame, yeah, this is just one that on a story level, as terms of characters or things I can latch on to, it just isn't present for me. And so Bruce Lee is there. He's doing his Bruce Lee thing. I think if you're coming to this movie for that alone, you'll definitely have a smile on your face for the action sequences. But in terms of the acting and the actual story, it's not there. So yeah, those are going to be my thoughts on Enter the Dragon today as a 28-year-old guy who hasn't seen this movie since he was 11. Let's move on to the second review for this video, and that is for Clockstoppers, a film that I recently did on my buddy Dave's channel. His channel is called Interpreting the Stars, and yeah, this was a film he wanted me to revisit from 2002, a film I hadn't seen in a long time. And so yeah, going back and revisiting it, did I like it? No, but I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it either. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was kind of just right down the middle. I didn't really care about the characters, their story, or their journey that's kind of unfolding as you're watching this film. And that's part of why I put Enter the Dragon and Clockstoppers together in this review. You might be thinking, why are these completely different kinds of movies together in a review? And ultimately, the main reason is just because I just feel like these are two movies that just don't really have much going for them in terms of character development, story, and plot. You know, I would say Clockstoppers in a lot of ways has more of that going on than Enter the Dragon, but I would say maybe Enter the Dragon was a more entertaining film, but they're both really not fantastic films for me. Clockstoppers for me is just a really cheesy early 2000s film. I remember going to see this movie in theaters with my dad and my sister, and at the time, yeah, you know, it was a film that I remember like other kids in class kind of talking about when it first came out. But outside of like that little bit of time when it had just initially come out, it's just kind of another early 2000s film. This film is completely jam-packed with early 2000s music, like a lot of Blink-182 songs and just a bunch of other random cheesy songs at the time. I say that as somebody who is a fan of Blink-182, but you know, anytime you watch a late 90s, early 2000s song and you hear all the small things from Blink-182, you know what kind of movie you're in for. And so, yeah, this is definitely one of those. Overall, this isn't a film that really blows my mind. The basic gist is you have this main character, Zach, who ends up accidentally getting his hands on his dad's secret watch. His dad is a scientist and goes to these various science conventions and has various students that he's taught as a professor that he's very connected to. He's kind of disconnected from his family in that way. His son used to be a lot closer to him, but kind of feels like his dad values his students a lot more. And one day he ends up getting his hands on this watch that's amidst his dad's things accidentally, and it turns out that this watch is actually a secret prototype that was sent to him by a student who's being held captive because, yeah, this watch actually is a time stopper in a way. It actually puts you into hyper time and allows you to move incredibly quickly and do whatever you want, looking like everything around you has just completely stopped, which, you know, hence the title, Clockstoppers. So our main character, Zach, ends up getting his hands on this watch that his dad had, and he ends up getting his dad into a lot of trouble. There's people that are kind of in danger because of this watch, because the main villain in this film, played by Michael Biehn, who I did not know was in this film, and was definitely pleasantly surprised to see that he was in it, and probably gives the best performance of the film. Very, very over-the-top, cheesy villain kind of guy. Very generic character, but I enjoyed seeing Michael Biehn in that role. Yeah, that guy pretty much just wants this power. He wants the ability to go into hyper time at all times, and you know, there's a bit of a aging thing. If you're in hyper time for too long, that's kind of one of the negative side effects, and that's part of the reason that Michael Bihn's character is kind of the villain of this film, is that he's forcing people to figure out in hyper time how to fix this watch and the hyper time, you know, project in general, so that he can be in hyper time and not have to worry about aging as some people have when they are indeed in hyper time. So yeah, this is a really big, over-the-top, silly movie from the early 2000s with terrible character development, characters that are very cheesy with pretty bad, cringy dialogue. You have the outfits and the attire of that time that's definitely cheesy and cringe. There's a DJ scene, like a DJ competition scene that randomly just happens in the middle of the movie that is ridiculously and utterly cringy in every way. And yeah, overall, in terms of dialogue, character development, character growth, or really anything about this film that, you know, kind of has you latch onto the characters and feel for their journey, it's just not there. This movie really is all about just this watch that can essentially stop time, allowing you to go into hyper time, move very quickly, and it's just a silly early 2000s movie that as a kid I remember really enjoying, but revisiting it today, this may be the last time that I ever revisit this film. There's not really an abundance to really say about this film. There's really not an abundance to really latch onto about this film. It's not a film that I necessarily recommend for anybody. It's not really a film that I'm ever clamoring to watch again. But I do want to talk a little bit about the director of this film, which I was actually kind of surprised to see, was Jonathan Frakes, who, you know, a lot of people may know specifically from Star Trek as the character of Riker, and he also directed, you know, a lot of Star Trek things, whether it's TV show episodes or actual movies. And yeah, I don't really think he shows off the talent that he's shown with Star Trek properties in the past when it comes to this movie. Ultimately, this is just a bit of a forgettable in any way, shape, or form movie. Just like the dialogue, the characters, the story around them, you just never never really feel a sense of stakes. You never really care like what's happening. You never really care about the relationships that are building between the characters, because a lot of it just feels rushed and just kind of boring. That's not to say the movie's terrible, but it's not great. You know, it's just right down the middle. It's not even like oh, it's fine, it's good. It's just kind of like it's fine. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. I always want to go into a movie and at least care about the characters to some degree. I'm okay with a good, cheesy, very much of its time kind of movie, as long as it has a story that I'm able to latch onto. And this one, I just couldn't latch onto the characters. I just didn't care. And most of the time it was just my fiance and I looking over to each other and being like, that just didn't feel earned, as characters were having romantic moments with each other, or, you know, really great friendship moments with one another that ultimately just never really made me feel like those moments were earned. I never really cared emotionally about anything that was happening to the characters in the film. And when that can't happen, you know, what rewatch value does that film have for me? And the answer is really not much. Making films is hard. I totally respect that. And that's why I don't want to say this is a flat out terrible movie. There's definitely enjoyable elements about the film. You know, I was definitely entertained while watching throughout the course of the film, but it's just not really all that exciting, and there's really not much to latch onto, as I mentioned. The most notable actors in this film, like I said, were Michael Biehn as our villain. Also, Robin Thomas is in this film, and he's mainly notable to me because he's the villain Calabar from the Halloween Town franchise, and I've always just loved him in that movie, even though, you know, completely cheesy. Perfect example of really cheesy, in those cases, made-for-TV movies of their time, very much of their time, that for me have a charm and tell a story where I can latch onto the characters throughout the course of the movie, even if it's not necessarily phenomenal. This film kind of misses that kind of mark for me a little bit when I'm watching it, compared to something even cheesier like Halloween Town. You also have French Stewart in this film, who I know would go on to take on the Inspector Gadget role back in the day, and overall was just like a, you know, guy that showed up in a lot of movies back in the day. And, you know, he's in the film. I like his performance, but he's playing a very similar performance to a lot of the different performances he would give back in the day. And ultimately, I feel like he's a few levels higher than everybody. I feel like he's slightly in a different movie than everybody else. It is what it is. And yeah, overall, that's my thoughts on Clockstoppers and Enter the Dragon. So I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Which of these films do you prefer? Do you like either one of these movies? Have you seen either one of these movies? Leave any and all those comments down below in the comment section. Can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. Hit that like button, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.